Hi guys, I'm not exactly sure where you let off with Mr. Turpin, so we're going to pick up at World War I. And we're going to be doing this asynchronously, which means that you're going to be working at your own pace. And Miss Chase, Miss King, and I will be helping facilitate you through these lessons during intervention and during Mrs. Chase's class while you watch the videos and then answer the questions. So we're going to be talking about World War I. So by 1914, Europe enjoyed a century of relative peace with one another for nearly 30 years. Many idealists hoped for a permanent end to a lot of the wars that they had been experiencing. Some Europeans believed that progress had made war a thing of the past. Yet, in little more than a decade, a massive war would engulf Europe and spread across the globe. While peace and harmony characterized most of Europe in the beginnings of the 1900s, it was less visible and darker forces at work. And now we're going to talk about World War I and how Europe witnessed several gradual developments which would ultimately propel the entire continent into war. So World War I, we're going to talk about the main causes. That's the big concept of today's lesson. So the main causes, the first one's going to be, there are 4 of them. The first one is militarism. So that would be the building up of the armed forces to get ready for war. So there are 4 main causes for the war in Europe. You can remember them through the acronym. That means a word that's used to, each letter means a thing within the word. So militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. The 1800s saw a rise in militarism, or the glorification of the military. The nations of Europe believed that they were truly great and they needed to be and have a powerful military. By 1914, all of the great powers except Britain had large standing armies. That means they had large armies within their power, so they were just waiting for something to happen. That's what a standing army is. In addition, military experts stressed the importance of being able to quickly mobilize or organize and move troops in case of war. Generals in each country developed highly detailed plans for such mobilization. So they were planning for war. With each country's rise in military powers, others would raise theirs. So as one country had a larger military, another country became a larger military. The result was an arms race that further increased suspicions and made war more likely. The greatest competition was the naval rivalry between Britain and Germany to protect its huge overseas empire. Britain had built the world's most respected navy. As Germany began acquiring overseas colonies, it began to build up its own navy. Suspicions of the Germans' motives, Britain turned to increased naval spending. So militarism is the first cause of World War I. So alliances would be the next one. Alliances led to distrust among the great powers, and they caused people to sign treaties, so countries to sign treaties together to pledge that they would defend one another in case of a conflict. So these alliances were intended to create powerful combinations that no one would dare attack. Gradually, 2 huge alliances emerged. This alliance system had been designed to keep the peace in Europe, but it would instead help push the continent into war. So there was the Triple Alliance, and the first of these alliances had its origins in Bismarck. He knew that France longed to avenge its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. Sure that France would not attack Germany without help, Bismarck signed treaties with other powers. In 1882, he formed the Triple Alliance with Italy and Austria-Hungary. And in 1914, when war did erupt, Germany and Austria-Hungary fought on the same side. They became known as the Central Powers. So if you look at it, you can see that in green, you've got Germany, Austria and Hungary, and then Italy. And they are in the center. And then you've got France, England, and Russia. So then you have the Triple Entente, which is the rival bloc that took shape in 1894 when France and Russia formed an alliance. In 1904, France and Britain signed an alliance, which is an entente, a non-binding agreement to follow common policies. Though not as formal as a treaty, an entente led to a close military and diplomatic ties, because the French and the British, if you remember from before when you worked with Mr. Turpin, they didn't really get along. The French and British, they still don't really get along. I mean, they get along to get along, but they generally, they're not best friends. So Britain later signed a similar agreement with Russia. When war began, these powers became known as the Allies. So you have what's called the Central Powers, which was Germany, Hungary, and Austria, and Italy, which is the center. And then all around the outside in red, you have the Allies. All right, the next one would be the I, which is imperialism. And you guys talked a lot about imperialism with Mr. Turpin. So as we've already learned, the nations of Europe competed fiercely for colonies in Africa and Asia. The quest for colonies sometimes pushed European nations to the brink of war. As European nations led to compete in overseas empires, their sense of rivalry and mistrust for one another deepened. Imperialism caused friction between the countries of Europe. Imperialism would also mean that war between the countries of Europe would spread into their colonies around the world. When the war broke out, rival colonies in Africa would be at war with each other, as well as in Europe. So even though the war technically was in Europe, the whole world was at war, because the different colonies in Africa and Asia were fighting each other, because France had this colony and England had that colony and Germany had this colony and Russia had that colony, and they would fight up against each other. So if you look at it, you can see that they're trying to build up their empire by increasing their defense expenditures. So you can see that Germany is clearly in the lead with 73% increasing their defense expenditures, whereas you look at France, they're not really increasing their expenditures. So when you look at it, which country has the greatest increase? Germany. So then the N is nationalism. So imperialism is trying to build an empire. So N is nationalism. The fourth main cause would be the rise of nationalism. It's a deep devotion to one's nation. So that's, feeling like America is the best. So nationalism can be a unifying force within a country. However, it can also cause intense competition among nations, with each seeking to overpower the other. Think of when violence breaks out between fans at a football game. The intense pride in their teams can sometimes cause them to do harm on opposing fans. Nationalism is the intense pride of the intense pride of the citizens rather than the fans. By the turn of the 20th century, a fierce rivalry indeed had developed among Europe's great powers. Those nations were Germany, Austria-Hungary, Great Britain, Russia, Italy, and France. Germans were proud of their new empire's military power and industrial leadership. France longed to regain its position as Europe's lead and its leading power. So if you look at it, you want to be on top. You want to have that national pride, and you automatically feel like you're the best. All right. So then we talk about what's the spark. So what actually happened that was like, bam. So we had everything in place to cause a world war. And then what was the spark, the ignition that said, oh, now we're going at it. So because of these four reasons, by June of 1914, Europe was tense. Archduke, I'm full of bad stuff today. Archduke Ferdinand and his wife drove through the Bosnian city of Sarajevo, acting on the Black Hand Plan. Gavrilo Princip shot them. So this guy, he shot him. So that was the spark. So this Archduke, he was driving around and this other dude shot him. Okay? Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for the murders. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914, and the alliances came into play. So if you look at it, you can see where the assassination occurred according to the map. You can see that they were already talking about terrorism, a lot like we talk about terrorism today. And when you think about kind of what happened in Afghanistan, Iraq, and 9/11, you can kind of see how things kind of fell like dominoes. So the idea is one thing happens and then it starts a whole series of other events. So now you've got Austria and Hungary declaring war on Serbia. So now all of these alliances that we talked about earlier have come into play. On that same day, Russia, an ally of Serbia, ordered the mobilization of troops to the Austrian border. France came to the aid of Russia. And then on August 3rd, 1914, Germany attacked Belgium as the path to France. An angry Britain declared war on Germany, and World War I had begun. So it was one guy did something, and then the next guy did something, so then the next guy did something, and bam. The assassination or murder of Archduke Ferdinand sparked trouble. However, most historians agree that all nations involved must share the blame for a war that no one wanted. All right, so here we're looking at somebody blames the war on Serbia. Russia declares war. Germany declared war on Russia. Germany declared war on France. Britain declared war on Germany. So because of the four reasons, in June of 1914, Europe was tense. Archduke Ferdinand and his wife drove through the Bosnian city of Sarajevo, acting on the Black Hand Plan, and Gavrilo Princip shot them. Okay, so that was the spark. That was what happened. So what does MAIN stand for? Militarism. The A stands for alliances. I stands for imperialism. N stands for nationalism. So now you're going to answer the questions in Canvas. And I've linked in this PDF for you so that you can see it. And you're welcome to rewind and fast forward through the video to find any answers that you need. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And always you can ask me or Miss King or Miss Chase questions so that we can help you get through these social studies lessons. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.